Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing the mid-year book freakout / check-in tag. So I did this last year. There's two tags out there, the freakout tag and the check-in tag for kind of like mid-year stuff, and I just like to smash them together because there's questions on both that I want to answer, questions on both that I don't really want to answer. So I will have all the questions for both of them down below, and you can do as well as the original videos and things, and you can do whichever one you want or a weird mashup like I am doing now. I have not been tagged by anybody because I don't think anybody really needs to be tagged by these things anymore. We just do them. So let's jump in and talk about books. So the first question I'm going to answer is, how many books have you read so far this year? And at point of filming, I believe I've read 123, which will just go to show that if you essentially become borderline unemployed for about 3 months due to a global pandemic, you can really read quite a few books. My goal for the year was 100. It's obviously now been increased. I think I'm vaguely aiming for 200. What's really nice as well is my page count is actually up, and so is the average number of pages in the books, because that was a desire of mine to read longer books this year, so I have been meeting that as well as reading more books, so that's excellent. The next question is, what is your favourite book so far this year? And I'm going to do one for fiction and non-fiction because I couldn't possibly pick. For non-fiction, my favourite has been Tamed, 10 Species That Changed Our World by Alice Roberts. This is looking at 10 different species, both animal and plant, that humans have had a hand in either domesticating or cultivating in some way, and kind of shaped how they have evolved, and in doing so that species has also shaped how we've evolved and how our society has changed. So it covers things like horses and dogs, but also various sort of key plants and grains such as wheat and rice and things like that. Alice Roberts has a wonderful writing style, and I think that this is really just a fascinating read for anybody interested in prehistory like myself, but also if you want to see, there's some kind of discussions of things going ahead to the future, like GM crops and genetic modification stuff that we can be doing, and like purposeful breeding of animals and things like that. I think it's just kind of a wonderful sort of almost polymath style book, and I deeply enjoyed it, and it really cemented for me that it's not just dinosaurs I like, it's also prehistory. So it unlocked a bunch more books really for me. And on the note of unlocking a bunch more books, this might be a bit of a weird pick in some ways for my channel, but I think my favourite fiction so far has to be This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Matar and Max Gladstone. This is such a wonderful, freaky, quirky sci-fi novella. It's a love story between two, I guess, kind of alien species who are sort of coded as women, and it's generally strange and freaky and isn't bothered about explaining any of the world building, and really sort of throws you in at the deep end and leaves you to sort of flounder and try and understand the rules of this world. There's time travel, there's love letters between these two characters. It's stunning, and for me what it really did was highlight that I do really enjoy sci-fi and fantasy, and I've kind of strayed quite far away from reading those on this channel over the past year or so. So this has really sort of brought that back into sharp focus for me, and meant that I've been picking up more sci-fi and fantasy since then and really enjoying it. So this has been a wonderful way of sort of delving back into another world. The next question is favourite sequel so far, and for me there really was only one answer for that, and that is The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. I finally finished the trilogy. I finally picked this book up back in February. This is a stunning conclusion to an amazing trilogy. This is the Winternight trilogy, which is a magical realism / historical, which is set in medieval Russia, and it follows our character Vasya, and it basically is a combination of like Russian folklore and Christianity, and there's all sorts of exciting stuff that happens, and it discusses kind of like religion, and it's all just generally really good fun, super atmospheric, and I thought that this was a lovely way of wrapping up the series. There were a few potential plot points that I took slight umbrage with, but generally I really love being back in the world, and the character arc that Vasya goes through over the whole 3 books is just stunning, as well as the most slow burn romance you've ever seen. It's just amazing. The next question is new releases that you want to read, and for me probably I would include in this pretty much every contemporary romance I seem to be picking up at the moment is a new release, just because the people who I'm watching to get these recommendations seem to read a lot of new releases, so a lot of those do fit. But what I really wanted to, a completely different book I wanted to highlight on my channel is Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments by Saidiya Hartman. Sorry, I can't speak today. So this is a non-fiction looking at the turn of the century, and specifically for black young women who were trying to find their place in America in the turn of the century after emancipation, who wanted real freedom. And it also is a look at kind of the queer culture that developed around there and the queer identities. I'm not 100% certain exactly what it's going to focus on. It seems to be a very sort of social history kind of piece. I think it's going to be really interesting. It was longlisted for the BookTuber prize for non-fiction for this year, and because of that it's been on my radar for a little bit, and I'm keen. I really like social history stuff, so I think this is going to be very, very interesting. Most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. I generally am quite bad at being aware of what new releases are coming out, but on the note of contemporary romance, which is all I seem to be reading these days, as well as sci-fi, is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is a gay romance, and it's specifically a fake dating trope. I think a bit of a like opposites attract kind of vibe. I enjoy the fake dating trope, or at least I believe I do. I like it in non-fiction, but I have had really mixed results with it in contemporary romance, so I am keen to try another one, and I'm determined to find one that ticks the buttons I like. So this looks really exciting and interesting. I chucked it on a TBR couple of weeks back, not realizing that it wasn't out yet, but I do believe it's released at the beginning of July, so I think at time of filming it's not out. At time of you seeing this, I've no idea if it is or not, but I'm really excited for it, and I pre-ordered the Kindle version, so as soon as it gets in I will be reading it. So I guess that's technically going on my July TBR, which I forgot to mention in my July TBR, but my July TBR was about 30 books long, so just The next question, as a side note, do we like my new phone case? Anyway, the next question is biggest disappointment, and for me there was a clear winner for this one, and that is Incredible Journeys by David Barry. If you saw my Springathon wrap up, you will know how unbelievably bitterly disappointed about this book I was. This is supposed to be a non-fiction exploring the wonders of animal navigation, but David Barry really isn't a particularly good non-fiction writer, and so this book suffers from him not being a scientist and not being able to articulate a lot of the ideas properly. It didn't explore the why particularly, and it was structured very, very, very badly. So all of these things combined meant that this was a huge letdown, and even though it's a very cool potential topic in a book, this book does not do it justice, and it's not worth reading personally. That one was doubly disappointing because it was one of the books picked by you lovely people in the 10 books I'm interested in, help me pick my next kind of purchase. So I almost felt like doubly let down because I felt like I let you guys down with such a terrible book, which is absurd because I'm not the one who wrote it. But you know, there is kind of a give and take here. It's pressure on me to pick good books for you. Biggest surprise is going to go to The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, because this was the book that kicked off the contemporary romance binge that is going on my channel, so I owe it all to Christina Lauren. I don't personally think this is a particularly great contemporary romance. It's a fake dating trope. It does it somewhat okay. It's mildly entertaining in places, but I had way more of a good time with it than I was expecting to, which means that it was a lovely surprise, and it really kicked off my desire to read more contemporary romance going ahead in the future, which I have been doing. So for that one, I feel like it deserves the kind of top spot for biggest surprise for me. Favorite new to you or debut author, and for me again there was a real clear obvious one, and that is John Wyndham. This year has felt so insanely long, so it is baffling to me that I've only actually been reading Wyndham for about 6 months now. He's very much cemented himself as one of my favorite authors. Wyndham is like a sci-fi classic who wrote around the time of kind of the 40s and 50s. I kind of lump him very similar to H.G. Wells, but just a couple of decades later. This is the first one I read, The Midwich Cuckoos, which I absolutely adored. I've read 3 of his books now, and I've got a 4th that I should be reading in the next month or so, and I just think he has, again, it's a combination of really lovely writing style, fantastic ideas, and really exploring them very true to how I feel like reality would be, and they're not too crazy dated, which is also lovely. So I think that his work is absolutely fantastic and totally worth checking out, and I also particularly recommend The Midwich Cuckoos, which might still be my favourite of the lot so far, but it's very difficult to pick. What genre have you read most this year? It probably will come down to a combination of either romance in general, if you don't separate out paranormal and contemporary romance, because of me deciding to reread the Lara Adrian series, or non-fiction. but honestly, as you guys know on my channel, I read such a weird blend of different genres that it's very, very difficult to pick one particular one, and I don't do breakdowns like that, so who knows. And I guess the final question I'm going to be answering is, what has been a bookish highlight of your year so far? And for me, it was definitely hosting Springathon. This was a readathon that I hosted or co-hosted with Natalie from Curious Reader and Juliana from Blank Space or Blank Garden, which is her blog. This was really lovely. The Springathon was definitely Natalie's idea. It was to host a readathon that was themed around nature writing and non-fiction nature writing, but she was asking for co-hosts, and so I jumped on board, and it was wonderful to have an opportunity to try hosting a readathon. I'd never done that before, and it's been really interesting seeing the uptake, and also to really get an opportunity to shine a spotlight on a particular subgenre of non-fiction, because whilst I feel like the non-fiction community on BookTube has definitely been growing, which has been excellent, non-fiction is such a hugely varied collection of books, just like fiction is. So to just say you're a non-fiction reader doesn't really help to narrow down to find people who have similar tastes to you. So it was really interesting to find other people who also like to read a lot of nature writing specifically, and things around kind of natural history. I'm thinking about hosting another one later on in the year, on a different theme, so I'll say more about that later if it ends up coming off, but obviously it depends on what's happening in the world. Springathon was so perfectly timed to give me something to focus on in lockdown, with it being at the beginning of May, and the idea I have might be happening in September, which I don't know what will be happening with my job at that point. So I believe that is everything for this tag. If you're watching this and you have a platform, consider yourself officially tagged. Like I said, both combinations of questions are down below. You'll notice I answer probably only about 2/3 of them, so feel free to go and answer all of them in any combination that you fancy. And yeah, have a wonderful reading week. Don't forget to wear a mask if you're leaving your house, and I will chat to you soon. Bye.